All right, hey folks, welcome to our SOSV webinar series. And this week, we're going to be talking to the folks at KickStarter. We're calling it Kicking Off with KickStarter. So, we brought a couple experts in from the KickStarter team. We're going to talk a little bit about the work they do about KickStarter and about building, a successful KickStarter campaign. We have plenty of our teams have gone through hacks, which obviously kind of relies on the KickStarter model, but we have had a lot of interest from folks outside of hacks who want to know how they can get things started. So I have Terry and Julio here. They're going to introduce themselves and then do a quick presentation on getting a KickStarter campaign off the ground, and then we'll have time for some questions. So in the interim, for folks tuning in at home, I've enabled the Q&A app in Google Hangouts, so if you have questions, you can drop them in there. But other than that, we'll get started. So I'll turn it over to Terry and Julio, who can first maybe just talk a little bit about yourselves, how you came to KickStarter, and then I'll let you guys dive right in.
Great, thanks a lot, Connor. So it's great to be here and to talk to you guys about KickStarter. We'll start off with our brief introductions, then we'll jump into a few slides. So I'm Julio, and I am the outreach lead on the tech and design team. And this is my colleague.
Hi, I'm Terry, and I'm the outreach lead for food and crafts here at KickStarter.
And both of us, I think we both had very different paths to come to KickStarter. But my background is working a lot on things, digital installations. I've worked for a long time in marketing. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been here at KickStarter. Pretty much my job entails working with creators, providing them, leading workshops and providing creators with coaching and tips to help them develop and run successful campaigns.
And I do a similar thing like Julio does here. I coach people, I give them tips, I help them run their campaigns here at KickStarter, but for food and for crafts. And I have a background, I've been writing cookbooks for over 10 years. I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in food product development, design, packaging, marketing. I've even worked on food trucks. So yeah, a lot of different food experience here. Great.
So what we'll do is we're gonna just share our slides, and then we'll start going through that. So give us just 1 second, and we'll get going.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So right now, what we're doing is we have about 40 slides that should take us about somewhere between 30 minutes and 40 minutes to go through. And once that's done, we'll leave the final 40 minutes to answer your questions. So just really quickly, we had 2 slides to do intros, but since we've already done the intros, I'm just going to skip over that, and we'll get right into the good stuff. So as you all know, KickStarter is a funding website, but we have a pretty specific focus. Our focus is really, a platform where people can create things to share with others, and those creative, projects can focus on things, of course, food, tech, and design, which are the 2, categories that Terry and I represent, but also on other things like films, games, comics.
Julie, sorry to interrupt you. Can you just switch to the current window that you're showing the presentation in? I think that's different from the one that we're seeing on the screen. Or maybe not.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not. I'm trying to see what we can do, but it's.
That's a keynote right now, so I would go back to. Yeah.
Can you see it? Because I mean, for us, it's showing from on our screen. It shows that it's sharing.
Yeah, I can see. We can see the keynote itself. We can't see like a presentation mode for it. Maybe that's okay.
Unfortunately, I don't. Unfortunately, that there's. I mean, for us, it shows as if the presentation is showing here when we look at the Google Hangout little screen.
Okay, we're on slide 4. We can see the side menu. So.
Okay, great. Cool. So I'm just going to leave it open to the menu, so that way.
Great.
Here, like that. All right. So there's a little bit about KickStarter. I mean, to date, there's been over 94,000 projects funded. That's actually $2 billion pledged to projects, and those dollars have been pledged really from all over the world. The US is, of course, our strongest market. It's where we've been live the longest. But now we're live for creators, not just in the US, but pretty much through all of Europe and all English-speaking countries around the world. But again, that's where we're live for creators, but backers really, have spanned the globe, which is really amazing. And in terms of the number of backers, there's been, around 9.7 million backers, and 30% of those backers are repeat backers. So those are people who have come and have backed multiple projects on Kickstarter, which is something that gets us really excited because a lot of what we're trying to do is build a community of people who are celebrating creativity in all these different ways. A quick overview of some of the products that we've seen, because one of the things that excites us also about this type of funding is not just like the fact that you can bring things to life, but also the impact that these projects can have on culture, in a larger sense. I mean, we've had projects that have won Oscars. We've had projects that have, that are now in the permanent collection of prominent museums around the world. We've just had some really amazing things being brought to life, like creative tools like a 3Doodler, which is a 3D printing pen that really kind of took 3D printing to a more kind of ephemeral, fun, creative kind of artistic place. And then we also have things like people sending things into space. Even everything from serious projects that are actually trying to develop serious future designs for spacecrafts, even, but also silly projects like sending pizza slices into space.
Pizza into space. Someday you can do that too.
Great. So now that we've kind of given this broad overview, let's talk a little bit about how it works. We're first going to talk about how it works broadly, then we'll actually dive into very specific, kind of best practices about different parts of the storytelling process. So the first thing about how it works is that Kickstarter is a site where, for a project to go live on Kickstarter, there's a few core rules. They're actually very simple. The first is that a Kickstarter project needs to fit into one of these 15 categories. I know that most of the companies coming out of the SOS Ventures portfolio are in design, technology, and food primarily. I mean, also because bio related and science related projects tend to fall into the technology category. But beyond that first rule that a project has to fit into one of these categories, we also require that projects are, of course, transparent and honest. And there are certain things that we prohibit, like, we don't allow fundraising for charity. We also don't allow, financial incentives to be used. And of course, you can't run a project for anything that is illegal.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I'd like to note is that our creators choose what category they're going to be into. So that is really up to you.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, I think I'm the food lover in the tech category, so there's definitely a lot of projects that me and Terry will collaborate on that might be, devices for making food and whatnot. And sometimes a creator will choose to put that in food category, other times they'll choose to put that in the design category. So Kickstarter is an all or nothing funding platform. And this image here of this project page, we just put it here because it shows two of the core elements of an all or nothing funding model. One of them is, of course, the goal. And on this project page here, the goal is this $12,000 pledge requirement. And then there is the second element of an all or nothing funding campaign is a time frame. And the way that it works, of course, is that you need to meet that goal within the time frame. And there are a few reasons why we only allow campaigns that are all or nothing. And the first and foremost is that we do find that this limits risk. Because if you're a backer, you know that your money is not going to change hand unless the creator is able to raise enough money to bring their project to life. So you're not going to end up giving somebody money and have that money go to them and them not be able to actually complete the project or have the resources to attempt to complete that project in a full manner. And from a creator perspective, you're not going to get money unless you get enough money to bring your product to life. So you're not going to have a community of backers that are expecting you to deliver on a vision that you're not able to deliver because you don't have the resources to deliver on that vision. And beyond this kind of risk consideration, we also find that it's, this model is more compelling. Your backers actually have an incentive to promote what you're doing to their communities because they know if they care about what you're doing, they know that that's not going to come to life unless they're able to help you reach that base goal. And I think the numbers do prove that this model is compelling, because 40% of projects on Kickstarter are successful, and that is a really awesome number. You know, it's great to see. And you know, another important thing to consider is that pretty much 60% of dollars that are pledged to Kickstarter are from creators. And this is something awesome, because again, it goes back to this notion of community, which is a big focus of ours. Not only community at the site level, but we also talk a lot to creators about community at their project level, which is something that we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah.
All right, so just you know, we want to show a few examples of products in the, you know, design, tech, and food categories, and many of these are actually products from the SOS Ventures you know, portfolio. So, you know, these are some products we really love. I mean, first is, you know, the Spark, which you know, now is called Particle, but you know, an amazing you know, project from an amazing team, and what's really special about this project is that now, you know, Particle is actually used to power a lot of other projects on Kickstarter. So what began as a, you know, a product that was launched on Kickstarter to create a platform for creators, for you know, makers, engineers to develop Internet of Things objects, has now, you know, become, you know, the platform that is used by over 20 projects that have, you know, launched on Kickstarter.
And this is one I really love. This is a cultured coffee bean. Now, unlike most coffee that is usually just roasted and lightly fermented, this bean has been fermented by a bioscientist to emulate the kind of coffee that comes from Pacific coffee from the Southeast Asian region. It has a very deep, rich profile, and it really, really attracted an incredible amount of backers and support for something really unique that just has really never existed before.
And this is, you know, another product from the SOS portfolio. It's called Print, and it's a product that essentially turns your phone into a Polaroid type camera, so that you can actually take pictures and print them out and share them with your friends as a physical picture. Again, really awesome project. You know, that did an amazing job at bringing to life this desire that we all have now to, you know, go from digital back to physical. You know, I think we've all gotten a little tired of the purely digital existence that we're increasingly living.
And speaking of something not digital at all, a little bit outside of SOS, but still a great inspirational project. This is a salt created by Angelo Garo's team, who taught Michael Pollan how to forage for wild mushrooms, how to hunt a boar. So this is a wonderful handmade product that is definitely has a very much like a very foodie angle to it, that again connected with an enormous community, an enormous amount of backers on Kickstarter, and really just has brought an incredible product to life in the world.
So now that we've shown these examples of products that we kind of love in these categories, let's talk a little bit about what it takes to develop a product that can succeed, like these ones that we just showed. So there's a few areas, or I often talk about these as tools that you have, storytelling tools that you have to bring a project to life on Kickstarter. And we'll go through each one of these in more detail in the slides to come. But just, you know, the 5 things we're going to talk about is the title and project image, the, you know, project video, project description, rewards, and project updates. So let's start with the, you know, title and project image. This is really what enables you to entice your prospective backers. I mean, this is the one thing that they see before they even click into your project and are able to see your full story on your project page. So as you can imagine, you know, this is a really, as much as these are, you know, small elements in your project, they're extremely important. Their importance is oversized. We like to talk about these as the most visible parts of your project, because this is a part of your project that, you know, a lot of people will see that will never see the rest of your project.
And can I add to, increasingly more and more of our users are mobile. And definitely, like, if you look at the mobile app on Kickstarter, which is fantastic, you should definitely check that out in addition to the web one. This is what people is going to hit them first. They're going to see the title, and they're going to see that great image that you select.
Yeah, and so there's a few things that you should always keep in mind when selecting an image. You know, keep that image clear and compelling, and don't you know, make that image too busy. You know, don't try to fit too many things in the image, because then it's going to get cluttered, and it will be really hard to read it in thumbnail size. You definitely should, you know, when you're selecting a project image, do mock it up in thumbnail size. Do mock it up in the size that it would appear. We do actually, in the project build, we do show what we call the baseball card, which is the baseball card is how the search results show up on Kickstarter. We do show you how your image will look on a baseball card on the project build. So that helps you a little bit there. But an exercise that I've seen some creators do is they'll actually get their little baseball card and mock it up in like a mock page with a bunch of other baseball cards. So you can see how does my project stand out in a page full of other projects that look somewhat similar in the way that they're presented. From the copy perspective, you should really be descriptive. We get a lot of creators who want to be like, this is the best phone case ever, or that really doesn't tell anything about what you're doing to the prospective backers. You really want to find a way that you actually communicate some of the core benefits or some of the core features of this thing that you're bringing to life. And so that's really some of the things to think about there. And the one thing I recommend is when you're developing your project title and short blurb, you should write 20 or 40 of options and then select the best one, because you'll never know if you might get inspired at first, but you'll never know if that first inspiration is really the best short blurb you can write until you've written 30 other options.
Yeah. I also would recommend actually put the name of what you're doing into both the blurb and the project title. This will help you a lot when it comes to searchability. And and because sometimes if it's a little too generic, like the world's best clock, there's a lot of things that will show up as best and clock and world. So make sure that your name is in there, or your project name, that is.
So let's talk a little bit about the project video. We usually show a short video here to kind of just capture the essence, the kind of the core elements of a Kickstarter video. But I think in light of our technical difficulties, we'll just talk about what those elements are. And there are, a Kickstarter video really becomes, it's the main way that you're going to tell your story. And at least the essence, like distilling the essence of your story. There's, of course, some details that you just won't have enough time. But the first thing to keep in mind is that people, won't spend a lot of time on your video. So to begin with, you should keep your video short. I usually recommend 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes at most.
At most, yeah.
But even within that 1.5 minutes and 2 minutes, you want to get to what you're doing fast. You don't want to have a 1 minute lead in before you tell people what it is that you're creating, because people just won't wait. Yeah. And so you should find a way to show what you're doing in the first, ideally 15 seconds, definitely within the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, and one tip I have for that, the one mistake I see that a lot of people do with their video is they start listing all the rewards in their video. That's a huge, like, you have your whole project description to do that, and you actually have your rewards section to do that. So make the most of that precious moments in that video, and you don't need to do that.
Yeah, and a few things, that I usually recommend working with tech and design creators. I say that, you have, in the first 30 seconds, you should get across what you're doing and what's the core value proposition. What is the core thing that differentiates your product from other products out there, and from other things out in the world. Then, once you've kind of gotten that across, you want to actually dive into a little bit of the user experience, because it's one thing to say, like, this is my promise. It's another thing to actually bring that to life and actually show that, showing something in action, showing the user experience of a product is very different than talking about it, you know. And I think it's a way to, you always have to keep in mind that, on Kickstarter, people don't have that opportunity to go into a store and try your product. They don't hear about your product from their friends who have already tried it. So whatever you can do to bring to life the way that this product will fit into the lives of your backers, that is a really powerful way for you to engage people in what you're doing and for you to get them excited about it. So again, you show your value proposition and talk about your value proposition in the first 30 seconds, then actually, show the user experience, bring that to life by showing your product in action. Once that's done, what you also want to do, which is a core part of Kickstarter videos, is actually make sure that you introduce a team. You talk a little bit about your journey. Remember that, Kickstarter is not a place where people are just coming to buy products or buy food. they're actually coming to support somebody that's trying to create a new product or trying to create a new, type of food. And so you really want to include that story of yours and like introduce yourselves, talk about, your journey or it could be your journey, it could be your passion, it could be, the sustainable way that you're planning to produce what it is that you're trying to produce. So the last element that I always like to tell creators to put into their videos is the ask. You want to make sure that people understand that their contribution matters. This is not just a video like, hey, look at this wonderful thing I'm doing and everything's great. It's, hey, look at this wonderful thing I'm doing. I want you to be part of this. Your contribution matters. Terry, do you have anything else to add there?
Yeah, just really, it's all about asking people to join you. Instead of thinking I have to ask for like help. Yeah. And I think that's one thing a lot of people get really nervous when it comes to creating something like a Kickstarter project. Ask them to be part of what you're doing. Also, with that video, shareability. One of the things you really, the video should feel like a really cool movie trailer. I mean, I'll take cool out of that. How about compelling? Compelling movie trailer, okay? Don't feel the pressure. Feel just like something has to just be interesting. This has to just tease me enough to make me think, what is happening here? And I need to tell someone about this. So the more shareable your videos, the more likely that if you think it's shareable, if your friends think they want to send it to their coworkers, their friends, their parents, whoever, the more your story is going to get out there.
Okay, we're going to go on. I think both me and Terry could talk about video a lot more, just because that's something that we know that
we'll probably have some questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the next thing that we want to talk about is the product description. And the product description really is where you dive deeper into your project. Again, the video, you don't have much time. So you distill some of these core elements of your project. You ask for support. But this is where you kind of can go deeper into all those different elements of your project. You can actually explore a little bit more about the team, about the experience you bring to the table, possibly about the manufacturing process you plan to use, or the prototype that you've developed on your journey to where you are now. And from a product design and technology perspective, prototypes really do matter, and they matter for two core reasons. First off, because the user experience matters, and until you have a prototype that can bring that user experience to life in a way that's compelling, it's really tough to make your project feel very compelling and to give your backers confidence that they know what they're going to get and that they feel like they understand what the actual product will be. So this project here that I have as an example was a Bluetooth speaker that came out about 1.5 years ago. And one of the things that these guys did really well is that they did a bunch of different ways to bring the user experience to life, to bring product features to life. They actually used a lot of secondary videos, where some secondary videos were showing how the product was waterproof by actually submerging the product in water. Other ones were actually, where they told you about the sound quality of the product. They actually had some, they shared the speaker with some sound engineers and had those sound engineers talk about, the sound from the speaker. They would get, along the project, they would actually get samples from the factory, and they would do like these box opening videos where they would take out the sample from the factory and talk about what was good with the sample and what things still needed to be worked on. So again, they just did a really amazing job at bringing the user experience to life, finding ways to add credibility to the sound quality that they were promising to their creators, and just letting creators into this process of developing a product and bringing it to life. Which is actually the next point that I wanted to bring up, which is this notion of the design process and the creative process in general is really something that's engaging for a lot of people. I mean, I'll be honest, not every backer will care about your creative process, but enough of them will that it's really valuable for you to celebrate it. I mean, that is one of the core values of Kickstarter, is that you're not just buying a product, but you're actually getting to support somebody, and you're getting a glimpse into that creative process. And prototypes is a great way to let people, enter into that process.
Yeah. So with food, there is a similar way to think about this too. There's no hard rules for food or crafts regarding having a prototype, but this is the opportunity to show people your story. What, if you started out making your, your beef jerky in your kitchen, what inspired you? What kind of ingredients inspired you? What kind of adventures in your life just made you decide you needed to really create a product like this? Or if you're opening like a bakery, you know, like what is, why is your vision of what your kind of bakery, how is that going to be? How is that going to be different from any other bakery out there? Like, why are you doing this? So again, ownership. And it's kind of funny, in the beginning, I used to see so many food projects without food in them. Like people forgot to show their beautiful food. And there's such a culture now online of beautiful food photography, you know, like Instagram, Pinterest, and like so many bloggers, that you really need to step up your game when it comes to showing your great food. And there's a lot of resources out there about how to take great food photos. So again, own that as well. Show people what you make.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit about project rewards. And you know, project rewards, we tend to classify them into 4 different categories. So what we'll do is just dive into a few different projects and talk about, you know, these different types of rewards and how they might be rewards that you can use, you know, for your own efforts. So the first type of rewards that we see often are acknowledgements. And you know, this is a project that used acknowledgements very successfully. It's a project called Neo Lucida, and they were reinventing an optical drawing tool from the 19th century, and they were creating it for their 21st century art students. These were, you know, Golan Lev and Pablo Garcia, which are 2 art students who one of them is at CMU and the other one is in Chicago. And one of the things that they did is that they created a very low-tier acknowledgement reward. That the whole point of that reward was to get people to back their project and to share their project. They realized that not everybody is interested in learning how to draw, and that they thought that they were going to get a lot of interest from people who just thought what they're doing was cool, but wouldn't want to get the actual device. So, you know, they had this reward where it was literally, you know, an acknowledgement on their website, and it was for a few dollars. And that, you know, that reward, which, you know, about 13% of their backers selected, was wildly successful, and it was one of the reasons why they were able to get so much traction for their project on social media. Acknowledgement rewards don't always have to be such a low-hanging, you know, a low-value reward. I mean, we've seen creators actually have acknowledgement rewards that are much higher value, which includes sometimes, like, you know, they'll put a plaque with that person's name, you know, at an event, or they'll put a plaque with that person's name in a physical space, perhaps even in a wall of an office or in a wall of a community center or whatever that.
Or a restaurant.
Yeah,
they'll
or a restaurant.
have a beautiful wall, hand painted, you know, or printed in some way.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll put somebody's name in the you know, in the box of their product or things like that. So again, you can get, I mean, I think acknowledgement rewards are pretty straightforward, but you can get creative. And even though most of these acknowledgement rewards are pretty low value, it is possible to create higher value versions of these rewards as well. So the next type of reward is what we call mementos. And mementos, it's usually, you know, some physical token of your participation with a project, but it's not the thing itself that's being created. I mean, a bad memento reward often ends up being T-shirts and things like that, that, you know, most people don't really care about. But there is a world of like creating really good, relevant memento rewards.
Yeah, I mean, unless you are a band and you need to make merch anyway. Like definitely keep your mementos in line with what your actual project is. And this is a very nice one that I really like, that I see with a lot of brewers of both beer and kombucha, is like the growler, the printed growler that has the branding, is something that every kind of like brewery does. And doing that and offering that to your backers is something you're doing anyway. And it's something that really would carry your brand forward, something they love. They're going to come back, and they're going to come back to your brewery, you know, your kombucha brewery or your beer brewery, time and time again with that growler to fill it up.
Yeah, one good memento also example from an SOV Ventures company is a project called Volterra that launched, you know, very early this year. It's a beautiful, you know, fabrication tool that lets you, you know, print print circuit boards, but also it helps you actually, it also places solder and does all these things to help you develop, you know, rapid prototypes of whatever product you want to create. And their memento reward was this really nice ruler that had all these different tools for engineers who are developing, you know, circuit boards. So it was, you know, again, it was a small device. I think they were offered it for, you know, $40 or $50. but it was just an extremely useful device for anybody in the community that wanted a Volterra. And of course, the Volterra was a really expensive machine. I think it was $1,500. And this allowed people who are engineers, who are really interested in that type of work, but who might not be at that point in their career able to afford a full Volterra, they could back the project, support it, and get a memento that would be really useful for them. So that's another great example that I often use talking about mementos. So the next type of reward is the thing itself. And these are, I think, the most simple rewards because it's really just the thing that you're creating. So if you're creating, like the print phone case that I brought up earlier as an example, offering that as a reward is, the reward. I mean, I think nowadays where we have several SOSV Ventures projects live, we have Revo, we have Living Farms. I mean, all those projects are offering the thing itself as their core reward. And when you're developing a product, the thing itself will be your core reward. And it is, in order to cross the finish line, chances are, that is the reward that will make the biggest dent in your ability to reach your funding goal. So, and again, I think this one is pretty simple. I think the main variation we see for the thing itself is the quantity. People might offer sets of that reward. You might be able to get, using the Revos as an example, you could get a couple set of the Revos where you get a headphone for you, a earphone for you, and an earphone for your partner.
Right, and for crowdsource, it made sense. There is definitely the one for someone that just wants to try it out, but then there's the hardcore home fermenter that can't wait to make jars of kimchi all at once. So definitely think about your quantities.
And the last, type of reward that we see often is experiential rewards. And these rewards are really, are in some ways the most fun and one where you can get the most creative with them. These involve actual experiences that you could share with your backers. I think this is a great example here that Terry picked out.
Yeah, I love this one. This is the Museum of Food and Drink in New York City, and this is their first project they did with us. They found an ancient cereal puffing gun, and they rebuilt it, and they basically took it on the road, and you could go visit. It was at Maker Faire a couple of years ago, and this was a crazy reward. These rewards tend to be higher priced, and you should absolutely price them higher because they are very special and exclusive, but there are people out there that are gonna want that. And for this example, they would bring the puffing gun to you. It would be really fun. You'd have a night of exploding cereal. So think about, these are the ones that you should really think about. You're really gonna connect, probably face to face on a very personal level with your most enthusiastic backers.
And I think for food, I think that food experiences are maybe a little more common than experiential rewards on tech and design projects. But we have seen really amazing tech and design rewards. I mean, for just using fabrication tool type projects again as an example, we've definitely seen projects that have coupled learning opportunities with their fabrication device. So it's like you get to actually the creator of the device will give you a hands-on tutorial on how to use that fabrication device. So it's not to say that, again, we're not trying to say that you should have all these rewards in your project. You really have to figure out which ones make sense. So this is not say that you should always have one of each of these types of rewards. That's really not it. It's more just to help you guys see the different types of rewards that are commonly used. I mean, I do recommend creators sometimes to try to brainstorm around all these 4 buckets, but then they might only have rewards from 1 or 2 of these buckets that actually show up on their project at the end. And that's fine. You really have to see what's most relevant for you. The question that we often get asked is like, what are the most common selected pledges on Kickstarter? And across the board, $25 is the most common pledge on Kickstarter, but it's not the one that generates the most money. $100 is the pledge that generates the most money. And the ideal number of reward tiers, and again, the other 2 bullet points, the $100 and $25, those are numbers based on data that we pulled. In terms of the ideal number of reward tiers, that's more kind of our anecdotal advice based on working with many creators, is that usually you don't want to start off your project with too many rewards. And the reason being is you can always add rewards, but you can't remove rewards from your project once somebody has selected that reward. And the fact is your backers will let you know if there's a reward that they want and you're not offering, you will hear about that, you know, and so you want to, like, I always recommend creators, you know, 5 to 7 rewards to start with, and then know that you're going to end up adding, you know, somewhere between 2 to 5 more rewards while the product is live. And of course, you know, there are times where some products do require more rewards than that. That's okay to break this rule, but I think it's the notion is you want to, you know, the more rewards you add, also sometimes it makes it harder for people to choose. It doesn't necessarily make it easier.
Yeah, and you're going to have plenty to do once
Yes.
your project is funded. You're going to have plenty to do. Don't worry. Like even if you think only 3 rewards, yeah, you'll have enough on your mind and to take care of. So.
Yeah, because the more rewards you offer, the more work is required from the perspective of fulfillment. So something to keep in mind. So next up, we want to talk about product updates. And product updates is the way that you keep your backers engaged throughout the entire process. Product updates actually get delivered as emails to your backers' inbox. So this is a way that you proactively, you know, re-engage people into your project once they've backed, which is a really powerful thing. You know, what we see is when a product is live, you know, creators will send product updates more often, and that frequency can be every, you know, 3-4 days to every week to once a week. But it is really important that you do, you know, update your backers on a regular basis while your project is live, because that keeps your projects top of mind, and that increases the chances that your project will get shared. And you know, product updates are a great way for you to, you know, dive deeper into parts of your story. You could dive deeper, like if you're continuing to work on developing your product, you might actually have updates about the product while, you know, the campaign is still live. But you can also use this as a way to celebrate things. So, you know, this example here was, you know, a creator saying like, hey, we're halfway there, you know, in 24 hours.
Which is wonderful news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So use it as a way to celebrate, you know, good things, and just, you know, we do recommend that before you launch, you do brainstorm a little bit. What are, you know, topics that you might want to do for updates? Only because once your product is live, sometimes you get buried in like answering comments, answering emails, reaching out to press. And so by having done some work beforehand on your product updates, that will mean even if you start getting swamped when your project is live, which is very likely because it is a lot of work to manage a live project, you'll still will be able to send project updates on a regular basis. Otherwise, what might happen is that you end up sending no updates, or the updates that you send are very, you know, lacking content and are not very compelling.
Yeah, yeah, and that's again, it's a little bit if you have any experience with blogging, or you know, even if you do just any kind of bare bones social media. This is an experiment in pre-planning a little bit, thinking of some stock updates in some ways, like talking about your process, your background a little more, stuff you wanted to talk about in your video, but you realize you didn't have enough time to do that. You could even do a video update easily. You could do, you know, like just images. Like there's a lot of ways you can be very creative with an update and make it a lot of fun.
And then, you know, once a product has wrapped up, usually the updates become a little less frequent, but they're not any less important. Once your product has wrapped, your updates become your way to continue to manage the expectations of the backers in your community and to continue to keep them updated about your progress. You know, I think backers, you know, they will have a lot more confidence in you, and they will be a lot more understanding of things that happen if you keep them updated throughout that process. I often recommend for creators to pick a frequency of updates and let their backers know, hey, I'm going to be sending you updates every 3 weeks, and then really be good about sending updates every 3 weeks so that backers are not like, oh my God, I haven't heard from him for 5 weeks now, so what's going on?
Right. Yeah, and this update I like a lot because the creator of the Corrector's Jar, she was having some design issues that were going to delay the project a little. So if you ever face that kind of thing, don't hesitate to make an update. It's better, you're much better off being honest and straightforward with your backers than being silent. And I've learned a lot of great stuff from creators about, like, you know, shipping delays, about like strikes going on the West Coast, you know, things that will delay or somehow get in the way of delivery. So
Chinese New Year, for example.
Exactly. There's so many things. Like, so use this as an opportunity to talk to your backers. You'll find the overwhelming amount of them will be incredibly supportive. and we'll appreciate that you let them know.
Yeah. And so that's it about updates. So we just have, we're just about to wrap up. We just wanted to talk a little bit about community. And because, building a community is something really important, but it isn't something that just happens once you launch your Kickstarter campaign. As a matter of fact, that's something in an ideal world you should be thinking about, months in advance. And of course, for some projects, you might be developing a technology that is very secretive, so you do have to keep things under wraps. But in general, that's not the case. And so we just wanted to share some thoughts and tips on how to think about community and how to start, building that, early on. So the first slide here, we just, when you're trying to build community, you do have to look at, all the different areas or places where you might find people that are potentially supporters of what you're doing. And of course, the first level of that is friends and family, that's kind of your first stop in terms of, that's usually your first sounding board. That's usually, and that is the first place you'll probably think about, and the first people you'll talk about your project and start engaging in this thing that you're creating. But beyond that, there's of course, professional organizations, social organizations, your extended personal network, that you can reach out, through Facebook. And I think in the world of Facebook, LinkedIn, you have, both your kind of your first degree network, and then you can even often reach out to your second or third degree network through some of these sites. There's other, networks of contributors or collaborators that you've worked with in the past. And then there's, of course, the media, blogs, and, also just people that you can reach out to through forums, of shared interest. It really is, you do really want to map out this entire world and understand, like, what are the places that you want to spend most of your effort on.
And one thing I tell a lot of creators is, this is something you could do right now. Maybe you're still like months away from like really developing a prototype, or you haven't found a location yet for your restaurant, or you're still working on your recipes. Whatever all that is, if you have the concept and you know yourself and your story and why you're doing this, you can start thinking about all of these people now and start working on these partnerships and these connections now.
Yeah, and I think that's start early. Just reiterating. And I think one of the things to consider, I think, one of the things that you're trying to do is often build relationships with these people. I mean, even people in the press and bloggers. If you are building a company, and what your company works on is covered by these bloggers, or is in the area of interest for any social organizations. Like, look at it as building a long-term relationship that can not only help you in this one project, this one funding campaign, but that can hopefully help you as your business continues to grow 2 years, 5 years, 10 years out. So it really is, it's an investment that's worth doing, and it's an investment that is worth the time and effort required. Yeah,
and I mean, one thing I often tell creators also is the money you're going to raise is going to help you right now, but that has a finite use, right? That the money will go quickly, it always does. Mm-hmm. But the connections that you're going to make before, during, and after your campaign can go on for years and maybe beyond. So this is stuff you need to do anyway.
And I think one of the ways that you're going to be able to do that is by sharing. I think that's the one thing, like sharing what you're doing, sharing your passion for what you're doing, finding ways to share that and avenues for sharing that is really important. And that can be real world events. Real world events, you might limit who you can touch, but you can touch people in a much deeper sense. Often when you actually meet face to face, and actually show your product or show your prototype. And have those conversations, and perhaps even a beer, in a face-to-face, contact. But beyond that, sharing, online, sharing, whatever environment makes sense. That's really important. And also, as you're sharing, think about building, your social media presence. Think about, collecting email addresses. Think about what are those things that you can do so that, 6 months down the road, 2 months down the road, you connected with some people who are interested in what you're doing, and you have a way to reach out to them again and re-engage them in this process.
Yeah, and definitely on a note on social media, many times I meet creators who really dread social media. The news is you really have to learn to love some aspect of it and find the social media that connects with your community. With food, I got to tell you, Instagram is probably like one of the #1 things you got to do. But, if you're a comics, probably something like Twitter. Or like with product design, probably like also, what do you say?
I mean, I think
Pinterest or
Twitter can help, but also Facebook can be really powerful.
It is.
But I think to Terry's point, you don't feel like you have to be in every social media. It's finding out what is the right one for you that lets you connect with your community. It's better to like be on less, but be on the ones that matter and have the right focus on those.
It's probably the one you like to use. That's a hint. Hint.
And so that is pretty much it. I mean, now I think we'll just turn it over to the Q&A. So I'm gonna unshare screen, and so you can see us and submit your questions.
Cool. Well, first, thank you both so much. That's awesome. It's really cool to hear kind of from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what you need to do, what you need to be thinking of. So for folks watching at home, I'll just invite you again to use the Q&A app in Google Hangouts to submit your questions. I have tons of questions for you guys anyway, so I might just launch into some of those. But it was really terrific, so thanks. I think one thing I'm really curious about is timing. How do you know, and maybe you guys can draw on some examples or experiences from your own work with Kickstarter teams. How do you know when you're ready for a Kickstarter campaign, when you're ready to put that together, or really maybe the alternative, what are some signs that you're still not ready to put together your campaign or to launch your campaign?
Great. I mean, I think from the design and tech angle, I always tell creators, if your prototype, if you can't deliver a compelling user experience with your current prototype, and then you're not ready. And I want to be clear about that. That doesn't mean that your prototype has to work every detail. Like you may, let's say your prototype may need to do X, Y, and Z. But X is the actual core, of what you're offering. Like the Y and Z are additional little features that are nice to have. Like then you just need to be able to your prototype should be able to show X and bring that to life. So that if for example a backer would come to your to your offices and they actually got to see the prototype, that they would be able to experience what you're creating in a compelling way. That's what I say is kind of like the core requirement, and then of course you need to be able to show that in the context of a Kickstarter campaign, which would mean you have to show that in a video in a way that's compelling. But that's really and the part of the reason why it's twofold. One, if you don't have that, you're not able to show what you're bringing to life in a way that's compelling, or you're gonna struggle. But in another way, you just haven't figured out enough of the problem that you're solving. You probably, at that point, are not ready to really understand the costs that you're gonna incur to bring that to life. And you're probably, again, then at that point, you're raising money not just to manufacture what you're doing, but also for a lot of product development. And so unless you have somehow the funding to deal with that product development, you're also putting yourself in a tough position where you might even succeed on Kickstarter, but then you could possibly fail in your larger, effort. Which, for us, it's always important that you look at Kickstarter in a way that can really be supportive of your long-term effort. Like we've seen creators that have succeeded on Kickstarter, delivered a product, but then had to fold after they delivered the product because they just didn't run the project in a way that helped them set them up for long-term success. It just helped them, create a small batch of this thing that they were doing. So,
right.
Yeah, it's very diverse, the category, but like in the instance of a food product, you're making a product. We talked about some food products. It's very similar. Instead of a prototype per se, it's like you can actually not only make the thing, you've been probably making it on some scale already. Like you've probably been doing like in a small commercial kitchen or in your home. And let's say your project is about getting to the next level of manufacturing. It could be you're ready to engage with your first co-packer and you want to do like, a unit run of 5,000, or you just got an order from a distributor and you're like, okay, this is it. I'm ready to go ahead and jump to the next level of manufacturing. So, I mean, there's that level that you need to be prepared for that. Shipping do you have any experience with shipping? I often tell like a lot of my creators that I meet have never shipped their product really, or they've only done it on a tiny scale. This is where I say, this is where you need to start learning how to ship things. You know, if you're not going to have a co-packer take care of it for you, if you're doing it all by hand, this is when you send out and you've already done your homework and you've learned like what happens when you ship something to Los Angeles, Chicago, Toronto, wherever you're going to go. You know, so there's that level. Do you have the packaging set? If you've never put your hot sauce in a glass bottle before and you've never shipped it anywhere, you're probably not quite ready. You need to go ahead and make sure and see what happens if we mail a box of hot sauce to someone. Do they get the bottles broken? Do they survive that? There's a lot of like field work I want you to do before that. So when it comes time, when you wrap up your project and now you have to send out 300 orders, that you're going to be ready for that. So yeah, and usually there's the visual component as well. You already know your story. You can already pitch and say, hey, this is a hot sauce. Why is it? Because it's barrel aged in, you know, whiskey barrels and, you know, with hand harvested forage peppers. Whatever the story is, you know, like you got the story, you have the beautiful photos because you've already learned how to do that level of marketing. Yeah. So yeah, it's usually that next stage. You've been doing this for a little while on some scale and you're ready to take that next step.
And I do think a lot of things that Terry said about, you know, understanding packaging, shipping, those are things that, you know, like I think that research, you know, I was focused more on like the product development angle of it, but that personal work of like, you know, understanding even like how you're going to do it so that you can, again, understand the costs. I mean, I think that's a core thing, like understanding the costs, because there's some level of variability in the cost that you know, you're not going to be able to nail it down to the like minute detail, but you really need to have like an understanding of the general cost of like what will it cost to design and print the packaging, what will it cost to actually ship that, where are you willing to ship that? So like doing all that homework beyond the product is also, you know, really core, because beyond the cogs, you know, there is all these other things that you're also gonna have to cover with your.
Cool, thanks. We have a question here too from Alan asking, what's the ideal length of time for a campaign? 60 days, maybe are there specific times of year you should avoid, like Christmas or I don't know, 4th of July? How do you figure out the timing question and the length?
That's a really good question. I think the length question, that at least in the tech and design category, that's something that's been changing. I think, I mean, historically, one of the things we do say that at least your product should be at least around 30 days, because we do see that in general, your chances of success are lower if your campaign is less than 30 days. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've seen creators do campaigns that are less than 30 days that have been very successful. But statistically speaking, looking at all projects on Kickstarter, your chances of success is lower if you run a shorter campaign. What we've seen in the tech and design space, though, is that more and more creators have been doing longer campaigns. And one of the reasons that we've seen that happening is because creators are using digital marketing tools more often. And what that enables creators to do is that the standard curve for most Kickstarter projects in the tech and design space is you have a very steep curve at the beginning. So you have a lot of momentum in the first few days of the campaign. Then it slows down after a week. It's in the past, after a week, it was almost flat. The curve would be like going up, so you'd be, like let's say you raised $100,000 in your first week. After that first week, you might be like raising just like $2,000 to $5,000 a day, so very little money for the rest of the campaign. And then towards the end, you would get another little bump. What digital marketing has allowed some creators to do, not all, but some creators are able to keep that middle part of the curve a little bit steeper. So whereas before there was very little value extending your project from 30 to 60 days, when you use digital marketing effectively, and if you're able to get traction from digital marketing, extending your campaign by 30 days can actually mean a substantial amount of more money for you. But I do want to point out that this kind of traction with digital marketing is not something that all campaigns are able to pull off. So some other creators will end up having to manage their campaign for 60 days for very little, return on the time and effort of managing the campaign for those additional 30 days. But that's a kind of what I've seen from a campaign length. What
I mean, I would say I also have like similar sentiments on that. In general, unless you really have a very aggressive plan about what you're going to do, like you found the right digital marketer or some kind of marketing, like company that you really trust and you feel are going to do the work for you, because, there's a lot of trial and error out there. Doing a very long campaign can be very draining. Mm-hmm. It can exhaust you. It can be very like emotionally, like pull you in all kinds of directions. Yeah, it is. It is. Like if you wanted to do a very long campaign, one reason I could see maybe if there were specific events that you knew that you needed to be at to go ahead and be present at and live and talk to engage your audience with, and let's say they were like a week and a half apart, probably it's worth extending your campaign. Maybe opportunities will pop up in between, media that you didn't realize or support from other places. So in general, like that's why we stress so much planning in advance and planning early, because the more you plan out, the more you're going to have to fall back on when things don't turn out quite how you expected during a live campaign, which happens all the time. I'll say something about the short campaign though. I've definitely seen if you have a very type A personality and you're very driven and you're very much like, I have a plan for every moment of the day when this campaign is live. I've seen campaigns like totally just go straight up like this in a 20-day period. That is for a special kind of person, a special kind of person. And I've seen very motivated people pull off really great stuff in a very short amount of time. So there's something to be said for that. But I think 30 to 35 is a pretty comfortable place for most people.
And in terms of time of year that you were asking, seasonality, I think the first thing that I tell creators is the first answer to that question is, does your project have a seasonality associated to it? Like if you have a project the second biggest project ever, the Coolest Cooler, it's a project that's people are thinking about coolers in the summer. So that's a project where that project was run for 2 months in July and August. And that's a project that makes sense to run it in the summer. It's a project, the first version of that project, which was unsuccessful, was run the winter the year beforehand. And that's not the only reason why it didn't succeed. The product itself was less compelling, but that is a core reason. Like people don't want to buy coolers when they're freezing their ass off. In the summer, when they're thinking about going to the beach, then they're thinking about coolers. So that's the first thing. Beyond that, the activity on Kickstarter does tend to go down a little bit in August and towards the end of the year, like December through early January. So, but the success rate of projects, if you look at the success rate, it doesn't change. So what that says is that, most likely the number of backers and projects that are live on Kickstarter kind of go down in those months, but we don't really see, it's not like your product is less likely to succeed. I do recommend for creators to avoid launching their projects right around the holidays, because again, as I mentioned earlier, the curve on the beginning of a project tends to be really important, those first days. So in general, like I don't recommend you launch right near Thanksgiving or right, between Christmas and New Year's. But I know that Terry has an example of a creator that launched in Thanksgiving and did really well.
Because they did their homework. They really planned out and they knew their community very well. They insisted on launching midnight Black Friday, Thursday, like right in Black Friday. They wanted to do that. And I woke up that morning and they had already reached half their goal. Wow. But that's because they knew their backers were going to be online. So basically the ground rule about this, Searsall. It's a great project by Booker and Dax. It's like a small blowtorch for your kitchen. It's pretty cool. So yeah, basically think about when are your backers going to be online and when are they going to want to share or just pledge right then and there. Like we see a lot of traction in the weekday, like in the mornings. But in general, like I would also recommend for that to get that really awesome, that boost in the beginning is to plan some kind of event in some way. And it can be a virtual event too, something to gather those people you really trust and love who are going to back your project right away. If you get a good, healthy start, it's just going to make your project just look all around, just do better and succeed a lot more.
And you mentioned a little bit the day of the week. On a weekly basis, we do see the activity on the site. It kind of goes up and it peaks in the middle of the week on Wednesday, and then it comes down again. So that is the reason why we see so many projects launching between Monday and Wednesday. The idea is that they're trying to launch when the activity is going up so that so that they're live, maybe for their second day is on a Wednesday or something like that. That is why we see that being a trend. We don't have any data though to say that like if you launch on Monday or Tuesday, your product is any more likely to succeed.
Yeah.
That's just people trying to align their launch with a day of the week where the traffic on Kickstarter and activity on Kickstarter is going up. So
that makes a lot of sense. And actually related to that, we have a question in from Brian asking about trends in relation to the funding of projects. So the question is like, for example, is say 75% of funding pledged in the first 10 or 15 days of a campaign going live? Or maybe, what does that timeline often look like in terms of maybe peaks and valleys? And then kind of a follow-up to that being, if the campaign is getting off to a slow start, then what are some tactics you've seen that have worked to kind of change the course of things?
Yep. I think there is definitely, I think, this wrong notion out there that like, oh, you have to get, almost all the way there in the first few days or in the first week. 70% of campaigns in tech and design, this is not a general number for the whole site, but I know that a little bit more than 70% of campaigns don't fund in the first, 7 or 8 days. Mm-hmm. So like most campaigns are actually, working to get funded all the way through the end, through the last few days. Most projects on Kickstarter only fund in the last few days, and most projects on Kickstarter fund somewhere between 100 or 100 and 130%. So that is kind of like the majority of projects. And I think, what happens is most creators will hear the stories of the Pebbles and the Prints and the Cocoons, and they'll be like, because of course, I can understand that most startups, that's their dream, is to reach that level of success. Right. And they'll start, getting, freaking out, because like, oh my God. And I think that is one of the things to consider is like most projects on Kickstarter are, if you're funded, you will just fund or a little bit beyond that. It's not like that. Those projects that fund over $1 million are the outliers. There's only been like 100 and maybe 40 or 50 projects that have reached over $1 million, and we've had 94,000 projects funded. So when you look at as a percentage, those are very rare. In terms of like what you do if your campaign doesn't take off super strong in the first few days, this is one of those situations where it's just a lot of hard work. Like there isn't. I think the levers that I talk to creators a lot about is PR, and like that's why also the more work you can do there beforehand, exactly. The more relationships, the more you'd have leverage to then like use PR to your advantage once you launch. Digital marketing is something that's becoming more powerful. It's still very secondary to PR, but it's something that we do see some campaigns being able to leverage a little bit more. And then engaging your backer community. And those are your three main levers, like is, that we see creators using at whatever point in their campaign to kind of push forward their project.
Yeah, again, like that goes back to plan for the times, the lean times and the times that are successful too. And to that story, like most successful projects on the site do have a slight plateau, a slight slowdown in the middle. So don't panic when that happens, because almost always we see, due to your hard work and due to just activity on the site and all kinds of things, your project will escalate and probably keep reaching and pushing toward that funding goal through the very, very end. And that's just how these things run a lot of times, but they do succeed. It works.
And I do think, if a creator, for example, is in a situation where they just, for whatever reason, didn't have the time to do the pre-work as far as, PR and start reaching out to those people beforehand, then what they should do is they would need to do that work while the product is live. It's like if they didn't do that research to identify who are all the people who they would want to connect with. Again, and when I'm using PR broadly here, I don't mean just blogs and like journalists, but also forums. Like depending on the project, if it's a project that is more niche, then that PR work is really more engaging communities that are passionate about that thing. And unfortunately, again, there is no shortcut. Then it would just mean that at that point where the product is live, they would need to go through the process of actually identifying who are those people that they want to connect with, and then actually reaching out to them, and doing so. I think the important thing is that probably the top 20 or 30 people that you think are really could help your project. You want to reach out to them in a really tailored manner. You're not sending them like a canned press release.
No.
You're actually reaching out to them in a very like you understand what they care about. Like you want to make it like you have to position your project in a very specific way to the interests of that person.
And that's why you do your homework. Research who these journalists are, research who these bloggers are. Treat them like people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, common sense in a way. I have kind of another question that has been, in thinking about how our programs are structured. Certainly, if a team's taking part in hacks, hacks kind of culminates in a Kickstarter campaign for those teams. So a big part of that program is kind of getting them ready. Part of taking part in the SOSV experience is that we make those resources available in terms of getting your video up to snuff. But for teams that are maybe outside of hacks or teams that are kind of coming into it a little bit, maybe post-accelerator, if you are kind of running on the really limited budget, what are maybe the tools or resources? We kind of talked about them in a little bit. Where do you get the most bang for your buck? Is it doubling down on a video? Is it investing in maybe earned PR? What, for the campaigns that you've seen that have gone most viral, if you're on a tight budget, what's the best way to spend that budget? What's the best way to kind of maximize whatever limited resources you have going into a campaign?
I think unfortunately there isn't a right answer for all projects. I think it does depend a little bit on your project. Like some projects, and it depends on the talent of the creators as well. I think there are certain. I think that the fact is there is certain type of work that does require a lot of legwork, and it also then depends on to what extent can the creators themselves. Like I've seen creators take on the PR work in a really amazing way, but it meant that the creator had to devote a substantial amount of time. So people are asking, do I need to get a PR firm? I'm like, you don't. If somebody on your team can spend the few months before the campaign really researching that and really focusing their efforts so for me, video is one of those things that I think to do a really good video, usually creators do need some help. Like I've seen PR be done effectively by creators who just have time and effort to put into, doing that research, to put into reaching out to those bloggers and journalists in a way that's tailored and respectful. But when it comes to video, what I've seen is even the way to get a low cost video ends up being like if somebody has a friend who's a videographer who can help out, like the fact is like you don't have to spend tons of money. You don't have to have something super well produced, but it is a little bit harder to get up to speed in 3 months on how to do a really good video than it is to do the research and do PR work. At least that's what I've seen. In the design world. I don't know.
Pretty much, I feel like it is about your strengths, like what limited amount of time, what are you really good at? If you really already love social media, you're on there all the time, like you got that. If you hate it, probably somebody, someone with an intern or your kid, your tech savvy kid, have them enlist them to help you out. Video is probably the one that we hear the most though, like absolutely. And if you don't feel strong about that, like you definitely, there's a whole ecosystem now of people that will make a great Kickstarter video for you.
And I do think, to that point, in some ways it does become like being, finding people within your network. Like you might not be able to, if you don't have a lot of money, you may not be able to get the video person who is the real Kickstarter expert who's done a bunch of videos because they might cost $10,000. And but then it does become a little bit harder. Like, are there any, art schools nearby where you might find, a student who might be able to help you. And again, those are all, of course, there's a little bit more risk involved in that and going to standard, but then at the end of the day, like it's trying to do the best with the resources that you have at hand. But yeah, it is one of those things though that like what happens also is if you have less resources, sometimes that also just means that you might need a little bit more time to get to your Kickstarter. Like if you have a lot of resources you can throw at it, you might be able to develop everything in a month and a half and go live. But if you don't, you're probably going to need like 4 months to get everything in order.
Yeah, and one of the things I see a lot too with my food makers is that they have their normal hustle where they are at farmers markets or they have orders to deliver, and they neglect their campaign. So this is, again, how you plan in advance. And if you feel like you're not going to be able to be on top of answering, like messages and doing updates, that's another thing you might want to consider, putting that budget, whatever that little budget is that you have, putting a little aside for that.
Right. And then kind of on the same idea of budget, are there guidelines or frameworks that maybe you guys, when you're working with teams, have for figuring out what your ask should be? Should it be, super ambitious, or should you kind of like keep it to, maybe a little bit less than you actually need? Is it some kind of Goldilocks question number in between? What are, are there nice guidelines for figuring out just how much you actually need versus, especially when you're thinking about what you want to do now? Of course, like, you should probably know how much things cost and understand a little bit that way. But when you're thinking about a strategic amount to ask for, what are some factors that might go into that?
I mean, in the tech and design world, because, again, as I mentioned earlier, most projects that fund, they do only, fund somewhere between 100 to 130%. Mm-hmm. So that's something I tell creators, like, if you only get 100 to 120% funded, are you going to have enough money to bring this to life? Like, you don't, like, I strongly push back against the notion of like setting a lower goal to be able to blow past the goal, or to expect that, like, there's this notion like, once I get to the goal, people are going to have more confidence in my project. And I mean, to be honest, like, I haven't seen data that proves that. Like, that's this kind of idea that gets thrown out there. And I think that's an idea. Sometimes I hear that from a PR angle, where it's like, once I reach my goal, that gives me another reason to reach out to press. Like, again, we always recommend, like, know what you really need and ask for that. It's better to ask for, $300,000 and not make it. That's like trying to get a round of financing with VCs and not succeeding, than to have to ask for $200,000 and then you have 1,000 people who expect you to deliver something that you're not in a place to deliver.
Yeah.
I think the risk there is much.
Yeah. One of the things I often tell my creators is that this will help you a lot in just figuring out what your project is, because a lot of what the creators I work with have an ongoing vision. They want to keep doing this for years to come. So, they're very on that focus. But one of the ideas of the Kickstarter project is it should be focused. And to help you focus on what aspect do you need to fund of your idea. Do you need to secure a retail location for 3 months? Do you need to complete one co-packing order? Do you need to develop packaging, and print, 1,000 units or 10,000 units? So based on that number, that's something you can build off of. Mm-hmm. And that should include shipping. That's why we encourage, like, experiment with shipping. Do all your homework. Find out what it's going to cost to do a very like a good, reasonable goal. Not even worldwide shipping. Maybe only shipping within like your particular country or North America, especially if it's food, because you have to deal with all kinds of customs and things that, unless you're ready to do that, unless you've really thought about that. So based off of like a finite goal, we need to accomplish this, rather than we need to create a company that will take over the world, or we want to have like 50 restaurants in all these places. Think about the flagship restaurant. Think about we need to create like 3 SKUs of our hot sauce. Like, use that to build that number, and don't go too crazy. And that's what keep you from going too over ambitious as well. Everybody wants $1 million, but
And one other thing that I would add in the design and tech world is, like, if you feel pretty confident that you've figured out how you could deliver, let's say 2,000 of units of what you're creating, you know who you would work with, you've kind of confirmed that you understand the processes that you would be using to manufacture at that scale. Don't assume that if all of a sudden you have to produce 10,000 units, the processes and everything are going to be the same. You're just going to be getting everything for cheaper because it's like economies of scale. Mm-hmm. Because there's often, gaps in that scaling that you might not be aware of. Like, between 5,000 and 10,000 units, you might be losing money, or you might just be delivering products very late because you have to, produce them in separate batches or something like that. So really understand that, because there's a few things you can do. I mean, you can set people's expectations about the delivery time, that the delivery time will be tiered, so that you are only going to deliver 2,000 units by October, and you're going to deliver another 2,000 3 months later, or you can just limit the rewards. So I think that's one of the risks that I've seen that happen less often, but we have seen a few creators that overwhelming success has actually proven to be really difficult sometimes. Because also you're having to provide customer support all of a sudden to 10,000 people. That is a shitload of email that you're going to have to answer. And if you're not ready to deal with that, like, you could be putting the nails in your coffin, because everybody's going to be really unhappy with the experience they've had with your brand.
Yeah, and for food, I'm a big fan of subscription style rewards, where that's another way to sort of space out your production. So instead of having to roast 5,000 pounds of coffee and deliver that all at once, you could definitely space that out over the next 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and that's a really great way to experiment with your future business model as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. We also have a question in from Steve about non-US teams. Is there any way a non-US based team can take part in Kickstarter? What does kind of the international side of Kickstarter look like?
I mean, we're open right now to projects in many countries beyond the US. So Canada, the UK, New Zealand, Australia. We're open in most other countries in Europe. I mean, France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, Italy, Netherlands, Sweden. So most of Western Europe, we're already open. We even have an in-language experience for creators in Germany, France, and in Spain. So we've definitely expanded. Right now, we do have eligibility requirements where, to run a campaign, somebody on your team needs to be from one of those countries that we're open in, and they need to, be a resident or a permanent resident or a citizen of that country, and you need to have a bank account in that country. You can set up your campaign as a legal entity or as an individual, but even if you set up a campaign as a legal entity, you still need to have a human being from that country that's connected to the campaign. So that is one of the things I do want to bring up, because I do have creators who will set up a company in the US and they're like, okay, now I can run a product as a US project. And unfortunately, that's not the case. We do need a human being from that country to be linked to the project.
And do that early. Do that as one of the first things. Get that set and out of the way, because it'll make your life a lot happier.
Yeah. That's certainly easy for our teams, because they're all over the map. Cool.
Yeah, if you look at the FAQs on the site in the eligibility section, for it's like the first section of the creator questions, we do list out all the countries. So I know I gave you kind of a general sense of the countries, but there it kind of lists out every single one.
Perfect. Great. Cool. Okay. So another question in. So basically, it's the final day of your campaign. The next day, let's say you've met your goal or exceeded it. What are the top things you need to start cranking on right away? And then maybe on the other side of that, let's say you haven't raised your goal. What does round 2 look like for you?
Great.
Either way, if you succeed or you don't meet your goal, send an update. Okay, and they're both really important. Okay, the one if you succeed is the one thanking your backers. It should be celebratory. It should be letting them know you're okay, you're alive, and you're really excited, because trust me, very few people are sleeping around this point as far as creators go. Let them know that you're really grateful for their support, and now you are going to go on to stage 2. Now it's really going to happen. If you don't succeed, still thank your backers. Say, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate your support. I'm not gonna, this is probably not the end for what I'm doing. This is a time when we advise people, if you don't succeed, take a break. We have many creators return who didn't succeed the first time, and they get it the second time. But this is like a chance to say, take a kind of reflect on what you're doing. But either way, thank your backers. Thank your backers, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a few things that I see, once you let's say you succeed first. Let's take that cut. So if you succeed, we spend 7 days working to collect pledges from your backers. During those 7 days, you will get questions about that. So you should be ready to, at that point, just send your backers to Kickstarter support because we can help them. You as the creator don't have the tools to help them get their credit card processed. So that 7 days will be when you're going to get a lot of questions for that. It will take about, it takes 14 days for us to process all the payments and another few days for the payout to arrive to the creator. So that you have about 20 days where what you can do, that's before you actually get your money, and you can start planning, like that, like doing more detailed plans around that phase. Because at that point, you'll know your quantities, you know how many people backed for your project at different levels. And then you can really start like figuring out like what are the steps you need to take to really finalize those deals with the manufacturers that you might have already been talking to. You want to map out what are still maybe those engineering challenges that you're still working on design for manufacturing. Like what are those? Like really map that out, because then what you're going to want to start doing is being more granular. Like before, when your product is live, you probably only share like a general timeline with your backers. Like, oh, and then it's going to take us 2 months to finish X and another 2 months to finish Y, and then we'll be fulfilling and delivering. But once you get into production, you actually want to start communicating with your backers at a little bit more granular level about manufacturing and about distribution. So that gives you those 20 days gives you a chance to kind of prepare for that and really kind of set yourself to start that off well, to start that process off well. Again, that's a period of time that you want to figure out like how you want to commit to your backers about a frequency of updates. It's okay if those updates are every 2 weeks or every month, but just be very transparent about that with your backers. And make sure that if your updates are every month, they're probably going to be longer than if they're every 2 weeks. Be very like even if you have nothing like if everything is going fine, like send an update to your backers at the frequency you told them you're going to send it to them, saying everything is fine. I don't have any big thing to report, or like everything is fine. We in the last month have been able to check off all these boxes on our project plan to get you the product on time.
Yeah, no update is too small.
Yeah, and so I think that's what what you would do. I mean, other things that you want to do as a creator is we have something called the Spotlight page. The Spotlight page is what we call the top section of your project that once you fund, you can customize that section of your project. So you can change the title, you can change the short blurb, you can add different images to that section. And there's the button that you can send people to your own website or to somewhere else. So sometimes creators will use that to continue taking pre-orders. I always suggest like only take pre-orders if you really are ready to take pre-orders. Don't feel like you have to. But if you do want to do that, you should try to have that set up so that as soon as your campaign ends, you update the Spotlight page and you start sending people to your own website or wherever you want to take those pre-orders, because what you'll see is the traffic that will linger to your Kickstarter project will be higher in those few days after your campaign. So if you are trying to take advantage of that, momentum, you want to make sure that as soon as your campaign ends, you're able to put up the Spotlight page and send people to your own website and have that ready to take pre-orders if that's something that you you want to do.
Or even if you're not ready to do pre-orders, just use it as an opportunity to collect their information. Just like a newsletter, just say, hey, email. Because and it's something you could do. You can set up your Spotlight page pretty much the moment you're done, like the actual project ends, and it looks really nice. It's like it looks lively and engaging instead of just like this is something that it's done and you can't interact with anymore. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, and we always talk about the updates for your backers, but you can do public updates or private updates. Public updates are updates that are available to the whole world. So when you're doing updates, even after your product ends, you should consider that some of those updates might be something you want to do publicly. Like if you are talking about like, hey, pre-orders are going to be available in 4 months or in 3 months, you could have a public update so that when a backer comes to your page, not only is there a button where they can go to your website and maybe sign up for an email list, but they actually can see an update where you talk about when your product will be available, because that will be very visible on your Kickstarter page.
All right.
So now let's flip again to if your product does not succeed, just kind of adding to what Terry said, you still have access to this community of people. So let's say 400 people backed your project and your product still did not succeed. You can still communicate to these 400 people via updates And these people, you still now have identified 400 people who are willing to give you money to help bring this thing that you're bringing to life. So you definitely should still look at them as your community and figure out, like, are you running another project, or are you trying to activate that interest in some other way in support of your vision?
Right. Perfect. Makes a lot of sense. All right. I think we have time for about one more question. And it's from Alan again. Do you guys, so you recently, Kickstarter recently kind of is shaking things up a little bit, kind of turning itself into a public benefit corporation. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about what that means, how that might impact the projects you guys are interested in, and just, where all that's coming from? I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think the core thing there is, I know that from the outside it seems like that's a big shift, but I think for us from the inside, I think we're not working differently. It's like all the commitments we've made as a public benefit corporations are commitments that we already had internally, and that reflect ways that we were already working internally. So the way we've curated projects all along will continue to be the way that we do. And I think, I think talking to creators, like, we don't use our features as like ad placements. We actually use our features. We have a curation team that really focuses on finding products that they feel are aligned with our brand, that they feel, are good examples for other creators as good examples of how to bring to life a story. They're compelling products to backers. And those are things we're going to continue to do. So it's not really, I think, changing that much. I think it's more like just spelling out our commitment to those things. I think a lot of a lot of what that charter spells out is our commitment to supporting communities of creators, whether they're filmmakers, designers, chefs. Like, that's the core of our mission, and that's always going to be the core of what we're doing. And that for us, we're supporting those communities, before money. Like, money for us is a means to allowing us to support these communities. It's not, but to the point that I think your Alan might be getting to is, our whole culture, like, we celebrate much more projects that feel authentic than projects that feel like they're a marketing campaign, which is why, like, we love videos where it's like, it's the creator is actually part of the story and talk about their inspiration. It doesn't just look like some slick advertisement that could just as well be, on television. Like, those, like, culturally, that's not something that that we embrace as much. So I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, that's like, that's pretty much how I feel too. Like, we're all about authenticity and integrity. We really are very transparent about how we operate here. And not only, we encourage it among our creators and our backers too, but I feel that the B Corp has been a way to sort of push forward and really kind of like grow the company.
Cool. Perfect. All right, folks. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. I'll be sure to share this deck that I have the PDF of it with everybody who tuned in, and people who, if you didn't have a chance to watch this will be up on YouTube shortly. So, never fear. And so I want to thank you both, Terry and Julio, so much for your time today. This is perfect for our teams, really exciting. So thanks very much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Connor.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.